Hi folks, welcome to Monday's Coffee and Colossians. I'm up at the office at Moore College, and you probably hear the sound of the students out the back there playing cricket at lunchtime, which they always do. Well, this week we are going to look at Colossians chapter 4, and for the first three, I think, we're going to look at some basic principles of evangelism. So I wanted to say one or two things about that. Sometimes I think we get very discouraged by evangelism. Sometimes I think we don't really know what it is. I think there's a great deal of misunderstanding. And sometimes I think there is a problem plunging in with what I would call direct evangelism, because people often get discouraged. So I want to talk about something called responsive evangelism, which is what I think this passage teaches us about, which is responding to people's questions and needs. Now, this is not about better techniques. This is just about opportunities to answer everyone, the questions being put by other people, to accept openings rather than just make them. I don't think this limits witness. I think rather that questions are everywhere and we should be everywhere. And I think this approach means we'll have a greater dependence on God's leading and a relative and sensitive witness. It's the outsider who chooses the time, the place, and the subject. The Christian gets to speak of Christ. So I'm thinking as an example of this in the book of Acts and chapter 8. And now I've just been thinking so much about the book of Acts, and we'll maybe come on to that in another time. But Acts 8 verse 35, this is with the Ethiopian eunuch. Then Philip began with that very passage and told him the good news about Jesus. So yesterday we were up in Newcastle, and as I mentioned already, we're hoping to move there and eventually to become minister of Hamilton, Scots Kirk in Hamilton Presbyterian Church. And I think being up at the weekend made both myself and Annabelle realise just how difficult a task this is going to be, because this has to be growing a church through evangelism, not any other means. And that's not easy in today's world. So this is why what we're looking at this week is so important. There are three principles. The first is this. We're reading in Colossians 4 and verse 5. Be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. So be wise. It's tact. We are to walk in wisdom. It's a big theme in Colossians. Colossians 1:9. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of His will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives. Or 1:28, He is the one we proclaim, admonishing and teaching everyone with all wisdom. Or 2:3, in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. 2:23, such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom. And then 3:16, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdoms through psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. So, wisdom, as you know, is more than being intelligent or clever. It's essentially practical and realistic. It is a deep respect for God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's a teachable spirit leading to a spiritual and moral maturity. Wisdom is, if you like, God's truth brought to life on earth. The non-Christians at this time were often speaking against Christians, as has always been the case. They called the Christians atheists because they did not have idols or a temple, unpatriotic because they did not burn incense to Caesar, immoral because they met behind closed doors. Paul wants no opportunity to be given for this slander, and so he says, be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. 1 Corinthians 10:32, do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews or Greeks or the church of God. even as I try to please everybody in every way, for I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, that they may be saved. F.S. Bruce has expressed it really well. It remains true that the reputation of the gospel is bound up with the behavior of those who claim to have experienced its saving power. I think the Bible is incredibly realistic. When we're going through Colossians, Corinthians, Thessalonians, Ephesians, these are not paper Christians, these are real situations. In Corinth, there's sexual immorality and spiritual excess. In Thessalonica, families were being broken up because of lust, and there was drunkenness. In Ephesus, there was lying, anger, filthy talk, and sexual immorality. Well, how do you commend the gospel if you live in the same stupid way as you did before, if you're known for your bad temper, greed, rudeness, and hypocrisy? So the whole thing here is we have to be wise, and you and I, we need to ask God to forgive us for our foolishness and ask Him to make us wise in the way that we act towards outsiders. May God grant that. See you again tomorrow for the second principle of what I'm calling responsive evangelism. See you then. Bye.